All right, that brings us to 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So I think we will go ahead and begin the webinar. So welcome. Thank you very much for participating in today's GDipICL Lunch and Learn. So this is a great opportunity for you to be learning more about your future as immigration practitioners here in our GDipICL program with Queen's University. Before we begin, I want to go ahead and go through our acknowledgement of territory. So Queen's University is situated on unceded traditional Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee territory. Queens has put a major emphasis on indigeneity and making sure that we acknowledge where we are physically located. I'm also physically located on unceded traditional Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee territory, being situated here in Kingston, Ontario, Canada. We want to continue to acknowledge the wrongs that have been perpetrated against the Indigenous populations of the past that are still coming to light to this day. And we take this small gesture to make sure we are continuing the Indigenous focus here at Queen's. And we continue to support the work that is being done with groups like the Office of Indigenous Initiatives or the Four Directions Indigenous Student Center. Those are two organizations on campus that are doing some fantastic work for Indigenous learners, educators, staff, and the community. If you want to learn more, find them online. And if anybody self-identifies as an Indigenous learner who comes into our program, there's a wealth of knowledge and help immediately directed to you in your student life. All right, let's kick off with some introductions. So I am Don Ames. I'm the Manager of Admissions and Recruitment for the Graduate Diploma in Immigration and Citizenship Law program. And we have a wealth of knowledge and experience here today to provide you with all the details you need to learn more about the GDipICL program. Sharry Aiken is here with us, Academic Director for the program and Professor with the Faculty of Law. And we have two alumni with us. We have Hannah and Mathai here today to provide their experience going through the GDipICL program. Hannah is currently an immigration assistant, and Mathai is an RCIC IRB. So, like I said, a wealth of information and experience here to provide you exactly what you need to know about the program. Well, let's go through what the structure is going to be for today's webinar. So Sharry is going to be taking us into a GDipICL program overview. Then we're going to get some experience information from Hannah and Mathai. I will then come back and take a look at admissions, specifically what you need to know about the September 2024 admission cycle. And then we're going to go into our Q&A. So we solicited questions ahead of the webinar. We have curated that list down to a select few. We only have a limited amount of time here today. We want to make sure we get to those questions that seem to come up most often with prospective applicants to the program. And we've got a great number of questions, so thank you for your submissions. And then we will follow it up with next step and thanks. I'll be going over what we're going to be doing leading up to the application end date, and then what the summer is going to look like for us. But to begin, I think I will pass it over to Sharry to go through the program overview.
Thank you, Don. So it's my pleasure to share just a few of the highlights of this program to give everyone a better sense of hopefully what you're seeking to apply to. First of all, to say that this graduate diploma is the only English language pathway to becoming a licensed immigration consultant in Canada. There's another program based out of the University of Montreal in Quebec that offers a very similar program in French. And together, these two programs are the only accredited programs in Canada to become an immigration consultant. I will mention at the same time that we have many students who complete the program who are not interested in being practicing RCICs or immigration consultants, but rather with the intent of working more broadly in the immigration sector, whether in public service or in immigration settlement, or in other aspects of immigration policy advocacy. There's a range of different career paths that students complete our program through and then end up practicing. But we are indeed the only licensed program through the College of Immigration and Citizenship Consultants. In that regard, our learning outcomes for the program align with the college's essential competencies for regulated Canadian immigration consultants. And I'll be saying a few more words about what these essential competencies are, but it is just to say that our program has been developed from the ground up to align with everything that a prospective immigration consultant or practitioner needs to know. We prepare students for the college's mandatory entry to practice exam, which is kind of the gateway to professional practice through the college. We, through the program, provide a very deep understanding of law, policy, as well as procedure that translates into a wide range of professional roles, as I mentioned a moment ago. And the other thing that's, I think, quite important about this program is that it's guided by a national advisory committee comprised of licensed immigration consultants, immigration lawyers, and community experts in the sector from across Canada. So we've got really a group of people with national profiles helping to support both the development and the implementation of the program. Well, that's just a few of the unique features of the program. And I'm going to zoom in a little bit more with the next slide on the learning journey, if you will. Now, I'm not going to go into detail on each of the 9 icons on the slide. I want to mention that they're on the program website, and you can download this program experience document for further reference. But at a very high level, what does the learning journey look like, and what are the learning methods? So first of all, to mention that the program consists of 9 courses, and it's possible to complete on a full-time basis in just under a year. It's a very intensive program. And we like to say it's similar to holding down a full-time job if you take the program as a full-time student. You can expect to spend upwards of 40 hours at least a week, and sometimes many more. And a lot of the time, similar with most graduate programs, is spent in self-study, self-regulated, self-focused engagement with online materials. At the same time, a unique and indeed signature element of this program is that it's not all learning by yourself. Every single course students take includes live weekly tutorials with leading experts, right? Those are the instructors. And the expectation is that, well, perhaps about 80% of your study time is on your own. A significant component, 20%, including 2 or 3 hours, depending on the course, is spent interacting with a small group of peers and a leading industry expert, namely your instructor. So although the program is fairly large, the learning groups are small intentionally, right? You'll be in a learning group of somewhere between 30 to 35 or so students who you'll get to know quite well during the course of each week. And your instructor will be leading you through a series of case study discussions, role play exercises, and mini lectures, but really emphasizing mini because these tutorials are far more focused on interactive engagement as opposed to the instructor kind of lecturing you. The lecture content of this program is delivered asynchronously. So in other words, by interacting with a learning management system, you'll see video lectures, you'll listen to podcasts, you'll be assigned readings, and you'll have a series of knowledge checks to which allow you to assess the extent to which you've learned the material. So that's effectively what the journey is like, as well as some of the key learning methods. And I'm going to share on the next slide a little bit more about these essential competencies that I referenced. So these have been developed by the college, by the federal regulator. And indeed, I had an opportunity to participate in a working group that helped formulate these competencies, if you will. There are 9 of them, and they are intended to reflect the wide swath of both foundational knowledge that practitioners need to have, as well as critical skills and professionalism. So I'm not going to read them out to you. I think you can see the units on the slide. On the college's website, you can actually click on each one of these units, and it opens into an accordion where, in fact, each unit is elaborated in far more detail and includes a kind of metric that speaks to how we know whether you've learned that competency or not. What are the indicia of the learning? For now, for our purposes, what I want to say is these 9 units represent the ground floor learning outcomes for our program as a whole, but not the ceiling. And I mention that on purpose to say that the goal of our program is to ensure that students graduate with a good and confident grasp of all of these 9 units, but there are a number of other things that we teach through the graduate diploma that may have a little less emphasis in these competencies, but are more tailored to the graduate program that the GDipICL actually is. And I guess in that regard, I would really emphasize the focus on law reform and policy advocacy, which is not necessarily all that centered in the essential competencies, although it's there in terms of critical thinking and foundational knowledge. But I would say that this program in particular seeks to train not just people who are technically proficient in the law, but people who are prepared to push the law on behalf of their clients and on behalf of the sector more broadly. So there's quite a bit of emphasis on that law reform and policy advocacy element that's threaded through the program. Next slide, Don. So the courses, I mentioned there are 9 of them. Here they are set out in detail for you. A couple of things just to mention. You'll notice that with the exception of the final capstone course in immigration practice management, all of the courses are relatively short, right? And it's a signal that they're short but intense, right? So 6 weeks of ethics and professional responsibility is probably similar to what many students have experienced in a longer course, right? Because it's packed and it's intensive, designed that way so that students can finish it in under a year. Most of the courses are 6 to 8 weeks. We have one that's 4 weeks, and that's citizenship because it is a smaller content course. And I'll emphasize that the teaching of legal skills is threaded throughout the program: legal research, legal writing, and a whole range of other skills like cultural competence, reflective practice, which you'll learn all about, threaded throughout the entire program. But the first and final course of the program, so the foundations course at the beginning and the practice management course at the end, have special 2-week skills modules embedded into them, where for 2 weeks you focus solely on skills. And the emphasis there is really to ensure that students are introduced to legal skills and have opportunities to practice them in dedicated courses. So that's the range of 9 courses. We're ready for the next slide. And finally, this is a little bit about the delivery model. I mentioned that the program was designed to be completed in just under a year. So on a full-time study trajectory, students take 3 courses in every term for 3 terms, starting with the foundations course, followed by the ethics course, and then you'll see the other courses follow. And I'll mention here that GDipICL is not a buffet. It's not a, I'll choose whatever courses I want whenever I want. Rather, it's a set menu, if you will, where we have courses that build on each other. I mentioned how skills are threaded through the program. Well, skills instruction is cumulative. It's laddered. So the expectation is that students take courses in a certain order in order to maximize that element of instruction in the program. So if you're taking the course of the program on a 24-month schedule, you'll see there the 24-month pathway mapped out. And again, all students begin with the foundations course first, followed by the ethics course. And after that, there's this set trajectory as you have there. And I think that's it for the delivery model.
Is excellent. Thank you so much, Sharry. So lots of great information about the structure of the program, what you're experiencing, how it's been developed. This program's been really well honed into really aiding the entire immigration and citizenship landscape. So thank you very much, Sharry, for your explanation there. Now it's time to turn it over to the alumni. This has always been a #1 talking point in regards to what prospective applicants are always seeking. It's information from Sharry and it's information from alumni, and you're getting both of it here in one webinar. So it's great to have Hannah and Mathai with us here today to provide a little bit about their program experience. So I'm going to ask each of them in turn to answer these 3 questions. Why did you take the program? What was your experience in the program? And how are you using the knowledge and skills in your current role? And so I'm going to pass it over to Hannah to answer this first, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen.
To answer the first question, why I took the program, as Dr. Aiken has mentioned, it's the only program to be able to become an RCIC. But prior to that, I was at the cusp when the program was shifting over from all the other delivery options to Queen's, and I'm really glad that it went under Queen's under the law program, because there's that sense of robust legal training that we're getting. We're not lawyers, but there's a deeper understanding of a skill I never had before of legal, like understanding how to read cases. And so that was really fascinating for me as a total career shifter and not knowing this area at all. And so, yeah, I was looking for an alternative career path. I work in higher education, but I had a hunger for something new and something different to challenge me. And I didn't know yet what it was, but someone had planted the seed in with regards to a profession in immigration in 2018. And so it took me some time before I finally took the leap, before I was ready. The timing worked out in 2022 for me to join the GDIP program. So the experience I had in the program, it was intense. Like, everyone tells you it's intense and you only understand it when you're in it. So it was very eye-opening for me on a personal and professional level. As a child of immigrants, but born in Canada, I understood my parents as you know, they came to Canada and their journey, but I didn't fully understand like the mechanisms, the structure behind immigration. So this ripped open a lot of like ideas for me of what that means. What are my obligations as a Canadian? What are my obligations, and what can I do to contribute to my society, to my community, and find a way to fit into a puzzle piece or to add and to contribute. So that has become a larger personal conversation in addition, in parallel to my professional career shift into a different space for me. I sought out like-minded folks in my class. I think in the first day, during orientations, during sessions like not quite like this, but in orientation in August of 2022, I was already scoping out the scene to see who might be future study buddies. So that was something that I kept kind of in mind, because I'm a nerd that way, because I wasn't just looking for the grades. I really wanted to understand the space. So that was something important for me. And lastly, how am I using the knowledge and skills in my current role? So as a career shifter, I had no prior understanding of immigration. I've never filled out forms before. I've never had that personal firsthand experience. So I knew I needed to get experience. And I just got my RCIC IRB license 5 days ago, so super freshly minted RCIC. So that's how I'm currently using my knowledge. But I still don't know what I want to be when I grow up. I'm still trying to figure out what piece of the puzzle, as I said, where do I feel my skills and my prior knowledge in higher education and as a career development educator. I don't know yet how those pieces are going to fit. So ask me again in like 3 to 5 to 10 years. I don't know what my answer is quite yet. On to Mathai.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Hannah. Yes, I'll pass it over to Mathai. Mathai, please answer the same 3 questions. Why did you take the program? What was your experience in the program? And how are you using your knowledge and skills in your current role?
All right. Thank you, Hannah, and thank you, Don and Professor Aiken. So I think everybody goes through their own journey, right? So when I moved to Canada just 5 years ago in 2019, and before moving here, I moved with my family in 5 years ago, and I'd come through the Express Entry program. And before I moved, I had 10 years experience as a chartered accountant back in my home country. So it was the pandemic had just about started in 2020, and I was wondering what I should be doing. And during my immigration process, I became interested in the in the whole Canadian immigration law scene. I read up so much about it. I engaged the services of an RCIC based in Vancouver. I understood how the whole system works. I read up a lot about it, but my application was done by somebody else because I prefer to have it done by professionals. And but I understood the whole process, and at the same time, a lot of people ask me how the process works and how did you do it and how to go about this. So two things happen. I became interested in the process, and a lot of people ask me how this works. So it's a good intersection of my interests and uh, a lot of people finding value in this. So I thought it's a great time for me to um, I wanted to take this further and understand more. And then I applied for and privileged to be accepted into the Queen's program. And that's how I got into the immigration law program. And I did it in 1 year. I did the whole program in 1 year. I did my exam soon after my program. I finished in December 2021 and wrote my exam, my EP in February 2022. It was very systematic. After I started the program, I knew that this is exactly what I wanted to do. And this program was just perfect for me because I was really interested in it. It really gave me a very good foundational understanding of how immigration law works and an introduction to the Canadian legal system in many ways. So it really helped me in a lot, and it's helped me um, get to the place I am right now. So that's why I started into the program. The second thing is the program itself. Yeah, the program itself was, you see, any educational program can only give you a good foundational understanding of the subject, and this program is, I believe, as good as it gets, because it gives you a very good understanding of what the different areas of immigration law are, where we need to go to find what we need to do, what our clients need to do, how we need to proceed with regard to each application. Even now, in fact, I refer back to some of my material. I still have access to the OnQ, which I sometimes go back to. And even if some things have updated and things have changed, I still know where to go. So that really helps. So, so this program, while intense, it is an intense program, right? I was working at the beginning of the program, and then for some time I was contemplating whether to take both together and work and study at the same time. But I wouldn't have done justice to the program if I was working and studying full time. That wouldn't have worked for sure. So I quit my work and I just focused on the program for 1 year, and I think that really helped. And I understood. And I really enjoyed the program to a large extent. The information that I got, the learning that I developed in that year, has actually stayed with me. I've engaged with the subject well. I engaged with with my classmates, with the instructors, with the material, and that's the kind of thing that really helps in future. So I think in the longer I'd always recommend taking it in 1 year rather than part time, because that gives you it gives you that focus that really is required for something like this, I feel. And last question is, how are you using the knowledge and skills in my current role? This you see, the most important skill that I learned is to be able to find the information. You see, immigration law is such a dynamic law. It keeps changing. There are new program delivery instructions, new updates that's happening all the time. So the most important thing is to be able to find out when any new law or program or policy is being introduced by the IRCC and how it's going to affect our clients. So one of the most important things that we learned is to know when that change is going to happen and how we can use that information to help our clients. And one thing we have to remember is the course can teach you a lot, sure, but we keep getting better at our work as we engage with it and as we practice. With each new client, we keep learning more and more. In my firm, I specialize in spousal sponsorship applications and in LMIAs, and I know quite a bit. But the interesting thing is, each time I go for a CPD, continuing professional education program with CAPIC, I learn at least one new thing. Whatever it is, I at least learn one new. I think I know pretty much everything, but I learn at least one new thing every single time I go for a CPD. That's the most interesting thing, right? So I think it's continuous development. And if you're interested in a subject like this, we can keep on learning and we'll really enjoy this work. Yeah, thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Mathai. Really appreciate it. More from our alumni in a little bit, but now I will turn it over to myself, in fact, and just start covering a little bit of the admission criteria. I don't want to go too in-depth into this component. I will be hosting several different admission-specific webinars this week, going into next week, and leading up until the end of day, April 1st, which is the deadline to apply for the September 2024 admission cycle. So I just wanted to touch very briefly on what the admission criteria is for the program. As a graduate level program at a pretty prestigious Canadian university, the number one requirement of our program is a completed undergraduate degree with a B average. You also need to submit 2 references with your application. They will depend on your attendance at an academic institution within 2 years from the month of your application, whether you need to submit 2 professional references or 1 professional reference and 1 academic reference. All of this information is available on our website, and I'll post links into the chat at the end of the session so that you can begin your review or continue your review of our admission criteria at that point. Every application will need, or every applicant will need to submit a personal statement of interest response. We ask you a question on the application. You have a 400 word or 2,000 character maximum word count or character count to provide us with a response to our personal statement of interest question. And then some applicants are going to have to provide English language proficiency test scores. This is a pretty stringent requirement for those individuals who don't meet our exemption criteria. In the past, the College of Immigration and Citizenship Consultants had an ELPT requirement at the time of writing the EPE. That no longer exists. So the only point in which an individual needs to demonstrate their English language proficiency is at the admissions point of our program. And because we are a program that is instructed entirely in English, we want you to be successful in the program and beyond. So make sure you're reviewing our admission criteria on our website and knowing exactly what you need to submit for the admissions review process. One thing I wanted to highlight here is our access pathway. So this goes back to the education requirement of that completed bachelor's degree with a B average. Now, we know that there are some individuals who may not have the B average from their completed bachelor's degree, or maybe you've completed some undergraduate study, but you didn't complete a bachelor's program. Maybe you then transferred over into a college program and you've completed your studies that way. The access pathway allows for individuals who don't meet the academic admission criteria to still be considered for admission for the program by utilizing relevant professional experience in the fields of law or immigration specifically. You would need at least 5 years of relevant professional experience, and the way that you demonstrate that is by submitting your up-to-date resume or CV after you submit your application. There's an additional access pathway statement that we require from individuals who are requesting access pathway consideration. It allows for you to tell us about what barriers or hurdles you experienced during your undergraduate study that prevented you from meeting the academic requirements. So just make sure you're filling out all of the details of the application, submitting all documentation by the document deadline of May 1st, and you have everything ready to go for us for our admissions review. Just going to switch over to the next slide. So obviously we're here because our application is now open for September 2024. It's been open for a few months now. You only have a few weeks left to submit your application for admission consideration for September 2024. The application will actually close at the end of day April 1st. But that doesn't mean that you need to have everything in by that point. You need to have submitted your application and make sure that you have your main documents there, your reference contact information, and your personal statement of interest response. But additional documentation can be submitted up until May 1st. That includes transcripts from any of your post-secondary studies and your English language proficiency test score. So just make sure you're preparing as well as you can in preparation for that end of day April 1st deadline for the application. We are accepting both full-time and part-time applications for the September 2024 intake. We're also accepting the access pathway applications as well. Since the last time we've been hosting these webinars for our previous admission cycle, things have changed. We have updated a few of our admission criteria. We've updated one of our ELPT exemption criteria. We have a new personal statement of interest question in comparison to the 2 questions we asked on previous applications. We have updated our AI generation statement in regards to that personal statement of interest. Obviously, don't utilize any AI generation technology or other individuals to write the statement for you. And we've changed some consideration regarding the academic reference requirement. Make sure you're reviewing all of these requirements in full, attending one of my future webinars, just so that you are fully up to date as to what's required for your specific application. And again, we make sure that we encourage you to review all of the components of your application prior to submission. Make sure you check the spelling of your name. Your email address is really key because that's the only means of communicating with applicants. Make sure the contact information is correct for your referees, and make sure you have all your documents ready to go. The easiest way I always say to applicants when it comes to the document submission, have all of your documents together now in English PDF format so that you just upload them with your application, and it's easier for us to do the assessments. Like I've mentioned, there's going to be a lot of webinars between now and end of day April 1st. Sign up for them. I'm going to be putting a Linktree link into the chat at the end of this session, which provides you with the links to register for any of those future sessions. Tomorrow, I will be hosting a specific session on transcripts and ELPTs. And then on Thursday, if I got my days right, I will be hosting a specific session on references and ELPTs. And then beyond that will just be our general 1-hour reviews where you will be able to have your questions answered live by myself and my admissions team. Lots on the go between now and the end of day April 1st. Don't miss out. Don't wait on submitting your application, but just make sure that your application is complete. You have everything triple checked, all ready to go, and you're really ready to go for the September 2024 intake. All right, and with that, let's go ahead and take a look at our Q&A. So questions have been provided ahead of the webinar, as I've already mentioned at the beginning of this session. So thank you very much for your submissions. We may have some additional questions that have been kind of accumulating because we received a lot of great submissions. We'll be answering those at future webinars. So anything that I host from now for the next few weeks, I'll be able to answer those questions directly at a later point. But if something is really pressing, if you want to learn more about the program, or if you have a specific question geared towards your admission eligibility, we encourage you to email us at immigrationdiploma@queensu.ca. Myself and my team are available to answer your questions via email. It's a great medium to ask some very specific questions that may be relevant to you. It's not a place to be asking for a pre-assessment or if you're eligible for the program, but it's a great opportunity for us to really flesh out what your application should look like and what you'll need to be providing. So immigrationdiploma@queensu.ca is the email address. We'd be more than happy to answer your questions. But for now, let's go ahead and kick off with the questions for Sharry. So Sharry, we have these 4 questions here for you. And if you want to take them one at a time, that would be great. So the first question is, can an RCIC live and work abroad?
Thanks, Don. In a nutshell, yes, an RCIC can live and work anywhere they want to. The key thing is that they are responsible and accountable to the federal regulator, the college. They have certain requirements to fulfill every year. Mathai mentioned continuing professional development. Every RCIC has a set number of hours of continuing professional development they have to fulfill and reporting requirements to the regulator. But it's quite common for many immigration consultants to spend at least part of a year somewhere else because they may be servicing clients directly. Now, that being said, it's also the case that practice is increasingly digital. And, technology has facilitated the use of tools that allow us to speak and engage with clients all over the world from Canada. So, depending on the type of practice, it varies for people. We certainly have many of our former students spending part of the year in Canada and part of the year abroad, often servicing communities from their original home countries if they're newcomers themselves. So yes, indeed, it's possible to live abroad and still be a practicing licensed RCIC.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Your second question is, how does the program teach legal skills and oral advocacy, given that most of the focus is self-directed study?
Yeah, that's a really important question. Indeed, skills, instruction, and practice are baked into the program and really threaded through all 9 courses. And the way that students get exposed to legal skills is through sort of mini modules in specific weeks of their course, but then they're given exercises to go out and prepare, often with a peer. So for an oral advocacy exercise, for example, they may be required to run through a simulation in pairs, record the simulation, and then submit it for assessment. So we do that. We also have role plays in the tutorials where, for example, one person will be assigned the role of consultant, one person will be assigned the role of client. There's a case problem, and in pairs during the live tutorial, the students will be given a set amount of time to play those roles. So one student practicing as a consultant to start with, and then flipping roles and becoming the client. So all those ways facilitate skills, practice, and assessment. And it really is important because you can't just have book learning to become a competent immigration practitioner, right? Indeed, the bedrock of practice are skills. So it's everything from research, legal writing, communicating effectively, orally, being able to be an effective advocate before the Immigration and Refugee Board. So that's oral advocacy practice. All of those elements are baked into the program. Students have many opportunities to both learn and practice them throughout the program.
Your next question is, there are many agents providing visa advice and related services who are not RCICs. Why should prospective consultants take the Queen's program and seek licensing with the college?
Yes, that's a very important question. Well, indeed, anybody who wants to practice in the immigration space in Canada needs to be licensed. And that means you either need to be an RCIC or a lawyer, or in Ontario, the one province that accredits paralegals, a licensed paralegal. If you're not one of those things, and you're seeking to represent clients with Canada Immigration or the Immigration and Refugee Board, you're actually engaged in unauthorized practice. It's against the law, and there are serious sanctions that flow from flouting this law, right? So you don't want to practice as a so-called ghost consultant because it's violating Canadian law and it's punishable. And by the way, the long arm of Canadian law can reach even people who are outside of the country. Although it's a little more complicated, it can be done. So it is to say that if you're interested in practicing in the immigration space, and you should seek to practice legally, not as a ghost consultant, as someone who is licensed and accredited to practice with the relevant regulator. And I really underscore this to prospective applicants because we often receive applications from people who are effectively ghost consultants. And I want to warn those people that you will be screened out. And it doesn't matter if you haven't actually disclosed it on your application, because we check. And we do not want to be facilitating the growth of the ghost consulting sector, nationally or internationally. It has been the root of severe problems in the consulting sector broadly. And Queen's is attempting to be part of the solution in that regard, to train competent professionals who will become licensed and practice immigration in accordance with Canadian law. So that may have been a little bit of a long answer, but it is to say that it's a real concern, the ghost consulting sector, to the extent that those are the people who are exploiting clients, who are overcharging with fees and often doing very sloppy work. And we don't want to associate with those individuals, and we hold the requirements for licensing very strictly.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Sharry. Final question for you. What is your advice for prospective students to prepare them for the program?
So first thing I would say is to allay people's worries. If, like Hannah, for example, you had no prior exposure to either immigration or law, that's totally okay. We anticipate that the vast majority of students entering our program are brand new to these fields, and that's 100% okay. But what I would say is helpful in terms of preparing is to ensure that you've got the time blocked off, right? Whether you're a full-time student or part-time student, it's still a significant time commitment. This is not the time to be taking on major work projects that involve out-of-town travel, for example, that may conflict with tutorial times or may cause problems. It's not the time to be attending major family events away from home, when, although in theory you can log on to your tutorials, in practice, if internet connectivity is an issue, you may experience trouble. So it is to say to plan to free up that time. And I think Mathai really mentioned that as well in his remarks about how, looking at balancing work and study, he chose to go full time. I want to say that's not always the right solution for everybody. Some students may need to go part-time because they need to work at the same time. We understand that. But please be sure that you've blocked enough time for yourself every week, because these courses are primarily very short, right? And if you miss even a week's worth of instruction, catching up is nightmarish. So that's probably the biggest thing I would say. Maybe the second thing, and this is geared more for students who haven't before studied in English. Maybe they're very competent in English. They've passed the language proficiency test. They've worked in English, but they haven't studied in English, right? And so I would say one thing to help is to practice reading, because you do have to read a lot in this program, and you need to read quickly. And it's a skill, it's a muscle that can improve with practice. So read anything, read about immigration, read, romance novels, it doesn't really matter, but practice, and build that reading muscle, and especially the ability to read and synthesize quickly, because that will help you in the program. So maybe that's just a few words of advice.
That's fantastic. Thank you very much, Sharry. The next series of questions are for myself, so I'll just cover them quickly here. So the first question is, I want to study part-time. Is there a deadline to complete the course? Sherry's already covered the part-time study plan. So we have two different study plans for part-time students, 24-month and 36-month. 24-month is the most common and the recommended study plan, just given that 3 years is a long time to be studying in our program. And it's a very dynamic field. So things are going to be changing in those 3 years. So think about that 24-month study plan, and that is your cap. You have 2 years to finish up the program. As Sharry has already mentioned during that slide, there's a set menu already established for courses, and we get our part-time students to follow that. We do look at a lot of different factors when it comes to how these courses were developed and how the study plans were developed. The 2-year study plan is highly recommended for anybody who needs to maintain some form of employment while they're studying with our program. But as you've already heard from Hannah and Mathai and from Sharry, it's an intensive program. Start thinking about those professional commitments, personal commitments as well, when you're thinking about starting this program. The next question is there a different tuition/fees for Canadian citizens and permanent residence holders versus international students? Short answer to that is no. All students pay the exact same tuition. Tuition right now is all available and updated on our tuition and financing page. It's roughly about $15,176 for tuition itself, and textbooks are roughly about $800 for the entire program. So you should get a good sense of information there. One thing I want to note, though, is that we are introducing a tuition deposit for all incoming new students for the first term. So just be prepared to pay that to secure your spot in the program should you be fortunate enough to gain admission. So more information about that will be available via our website. Third question for me is, does the program require an English language proficiency test score for admission? So a lot of applicants are going to have to submit an ELPT score for the admissions process. We have some very specific exemption criteria listed on our website. The exemptions are that you self-identify as a native English speaker, that you have attended 4 or more years of full-time consecutive academic study in an accredited university where the medium of instruction was English. And then we also have the ESLA 150 English for academic purposes pathway for those who maybe want to improve their English language proficiency via the Queen's School of English. 3 different options available for individuals. Make sure you're reviewing the admission criteria and those exemption criteria in depth via our website. If you don't meet the criteria, you'll have to provide an ELPT score. We only accept a certain amount or different types. We accept KL Computer Edition, IELTS Academic, TOEFL Internet-based, and TOEFL paper-based. And for the first 3 there, the online ones, home versions, as well as the test center versions are accepted. Final question for me. Can students in different time zones participate in classes? Yes, you can, but what we really do encourage you is to think about your studies in the Eastern Standard Time Zone and plan accordingly. It's a significant endeavor to be participating in the live tutorials for all of these courses in a different time zone, even just across Canada, as I'm sure our students who are located in BC or in Newfoundland and Labrador can attest to. Exactly. Thank you, Hannah. It's a lot. It even expands further into the international focus. So really take that into consideration when you're thinking about your studies with the program, because those live tutorials are a significant learning element with the course, as Sharry has outlined pretty extensively. I am now going to pass it over to the alumni here, and I will ask each of you the following question. So Hannah, let's start off with you, and we'll bounce back and forth. In this case, we'll go Hannah, and then Mathai, you can answer the same question. But let's start off with, was it easy to learn in an online setting? Hannah.
I might be biased because I'm an instructor in post-secondary and I use the same platform, so I knew how to navigate around the different menus and just to go and dig for things that I was needing to look for. So little biased. I find the platform OnQ quite navigatable of all the different kinds of learning platforms available out there. It's very user-friendly. So I found it easy to find things. I wouldn't be able to commute. Like, as a working person, as a parent, it made it really accessible to be able to study online. So I found it to be actually a very refreshing aspect of the program.
Mathai, how about yourself?
Yeah, for me, it took a little bit of getting used to in an online system. It was my first formal education itself in about 10 years. So so it took a little bit of getting used to with the OnQ system. But once I got used to it, it was very, as Hannah said, very user friendly, and we know exactly where to find what's going to come up, where to submit things. So it became very easy as we got along, and by and large, the online learning system is very conducive for learning. It saves us a lot of time and has many advantages. The only disadvantage of an online system, I feel, is that you miss that classroom environment where when we are with a lot of our peers and classmates, a lot of learning happens then too. So we miss that bit. We make it up to a large extent with the group study and group assignments and things like that. But that part will be limited in an online system. Other than that, it's really good.
If I'm just tiny addition to that answer,
Mhm.
this uniqueness of our program being online, I've now made connections with colleagues and peers across Canada that would not have been able if it were just a fixed one space, like in one locale. So that I think is another signature gift of this program, is just a deeper, wider network from the start, from the get-go. But that's a personal.
Excellent. Mathai, let's go back over to you with the next question. Was there anything you wish you knew when you started the program that you would tell prospective students?
If there's one thing, it's to make sure that this is what you really want to do. I think that's quite important in a subject like this, because we can do the exams, learn the things, get the required marks, and get through the program. I think that's doable. But to be really good at this, I think it's important to really want to do this and to really like the subject, to enjoy it. So I think that's one question you've got to ask yourself. And if you really want to do this, this is perfect. This is a perfect subject. It's a great area of law where you can really help a lot of people. We can really find value. People find value in you. You can make a difference in people's lives. So one thing you've got to ask yourself is, do you really want to do this? And if you want to do this is the right thing for you to do.
That's a
Anna?
great point. Yeah. To add to that, in jumping into such a huge investment of your time, and to touch on what Sharry had mentioned earlier about the reading skills, I went too far the other way and tried to read everything and tried to consume everything. So that would be the one lesson I would pass on to myself if I could do that again. Read to understand, read for bigger concepts, read to synthesize, but it's not to read every single word in every single paragraph. Like understand, get to learn, understand the system of reading, of like the headers, the chapters, what's going on, what's the rationale for telling us this particular topic at this particular time. So see how everything kind of fits together would be my one wish I could do better. I regret not carving enough time to meet with the law librarians online and to better use that resource. I think that's a missed opportunity to have understood some other resources that just timing did not work out for me on that aspect.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Hannah, we'll stick with you with the next question. What was your favorite course and why?
Favorite course, there's a few. So the biz practice, the 890 class, just a pragmatic element of that course. Economic 840, temporary entry, and oddly enough, ethics, because of just the practical elements and the areas that I'm interested in studying in the future, or working in the space.
Mathai, how about yourself?
Yeah, for me, I was working with the LMIs and work permits when I started the course. So that was my favorite subject. I still like temporary entry the most, even though I do a little more complicated applications like LMIs and spousal sponsorship. Visitor visas, I find them particularly interesting because I think they're, that's kind of the first entry, and it's something that's not as easy as it seems for a lot of people. So to get to meet those criteria and to give a holistic view of why a person is making that application, to meet that the IRCC's requirement, will that person return at the end of the authorized period of stay, to convince the officer of that part of that requirement. I enjoy doing that the most, and that's what I enjoyed during my course, and it's actually still one of my favorite subjects.
Final question, Mathai, we'll start off with you.
Yeah.
What course was the most challenging, and what resources did you use to overcome the obstacles?
I think for me, the refugee course was the hardest. It was not a difficult course as such, but it's a lot of information that we've got to keep in mind. It's more. There are a lot more resources that we've got to go to. It's a lot more nuanced, I feel, the refugee course. So we've got to so it's not as straightforward as the other areas of immigration law. So I think refugee was for me the harder one, but I think there's enough information in the system, and the educational tools available on OnQ, and the instructors were great. So I was able to understand the information, get everything together, and still have a very good idea of how the whole system works. Recently, I was the only IRB qualified person in my office, so I represented a client successfully before the RPD, and I used most of the information that I'd learned during my course, and but still, I find it still the most challenging one. Yeah.
Hannah.
To echo what Mathai had said, 860 refugee and enforcement 870 were the toughest emotionally. It feels like the stakes are very high. These are domains that feel very far from me, even though I now have the IRB designation as well. That would take a lot of confidence building to be able to get close to that area to practice. So the resources I reached out to were my instructors. I would go to office hours, and not just to go over assignments, but just as professionals, like how do they navigate emotionally some highly high stakes, highly charged moments of like, how do you manage your clients, how do you manage yourself, how do you navigate those spaces? So those were my resources that I would go to.
Excellent. Thank you to you both for answering those questions. Like I've mentioned, the prospective students always want to hear from the alumni, from their experience. So both of you providing that, Mathai and Hannah, much appreciated. All right, we are getting close here to the end. Let's go ahead and wrap up. I just have 2 additional slides, and I've just put some information in the chat for everyone to review. It has all the key links to our webpage, the tuition and financing page, the admissions page, a Linktree link for registration for any of our future webinars, which are up on your screen now. This is the series of webinars that I'm going to be hosting over the next few weeks. So sign up and learn more. The more knowledge you gain about the admissions process, the better, because it is a daunting process, and we want to make sure you're utilizing your application fee correctly. So go ahead and sign up for any of my specific sessions or any of the general sessions all the way up until late into the evening, April 1st. If you want to learn more about the program, as I've already mentioned, there are links in the chat. Immigrationdiploma.ca is our main website, and you can find us on Facebook, facebook.com/Queen's Law GDipICL. One of the things I will promote here is via our website is the self-assessment. It is basically a survey that you do yourself. It takes about 10 to 15 minutes. It's several questions that are more geared to around how you would be in the program, how's your time management, how does your technology look like, and then some specific questions about admissions, which will really help you further. Take the self-assessment. It's super handy and helpful. I really encourage everybody to go ahead and review that. But that is the end of the session. Thank you again to Sharry, to Hannah, to Mathai for participating in this session. We greatly appreciate your participation, and we look forward to anybody who's been in attendance here today learning more about the program through additional webinars, through visiting our website, and hopefully we will see your application for September 2024. But for now, on behalf of Hannah, Mathai, and Sharry, thank you very much for attending, and we will see you in the near future. Take care.